Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. Curacao power outage resulted in Monday's internet problems in Eastern Caribbean islands from Dominica to Trinidad and Tobago. This story takes the lead in our 1003rd edition of Caribbean Perspective for Wednesday, 9th December 2020. Details when we return. Welcome back. Islands of the Eastern Caribbean came to a halt on Monday as businesses, schools, courts, and other public utilities were impacted by a sub-region-wide internet disruption. The incident occurred during the first few hours of the working day, but the authorities in Trinidad and Tobago say that the problem did not begin in Trinidad and Tobago. CNC3's Kyron Regis reports.
It's disheartening to know that in an instance, all the communication to the outside world and even internally went back till in the 1960s, 1970s today.
This is how one member of the business community felt today when the Telecommunications Authority of TNT confirmed that internet connectivity to several service providers had been disrupted island-wide. But the authority said the problem arose due to a disruption of an international cable link in Curacao. TAT also explained that the tremors of this interruption were felt in other parts of the Caribbean, like Barbados, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and Grenada. However, it notes that the source of the disruption has been identified, and work to restore connectivity is ongoing. The authority also confirmed that full service would be restored today. Meanwhile, this is what the president of the TNT Chamber of Industry and Commerce had to say.
Obviously, there was a loss of productivity because of it.
The business community also acknowledged that there was a decline in sales as the outage resulted in Lynx machines being temporarily shut down, with internet banking also being impacted. First Citizens Bank responded to Guardian Media, noting that the bank only experienced limited disruptions and intermittent communications issues today, but the bank noted that its core services were unaffected and it has strong plans in place to deal with expected and temporary failures from service providers. Scotiabank issued a release noting that it will leverage international connections to safeguard against experiences like today. But RBC said that since it had contingency plans in place, their network was not affected, and if there were difficulties, it came from the end of the user trying to gain access. While Flow apologized for the disruption and announced that its internet connection had been re-established, TSTT was thankful that it had invested millions of dollars in its underwater infrastructure so that it was able to keep internet access to all of its fixed-line customers. However, TSTT admitted that because of damage done to underwater cables in the Eastern Caribbean, its mobile users experienced difficulty with data earlier today. Digicel also indicated that its service experienced some interruption today, and its operations director Chandrika Samaru expressed that the outage has shone a light on some of the vulnerabilities of the international networks that support TNT. Samaru says this should be a catalyst for closer analysis, discussion, and collaboration by all industry stakeholders to address this national challenge. Kyron Regis, CNC3 News.
Still from Trinidad and Tobago, Basdeo Pandey, the man who founded the UNC in 1989, says the party is now dead. He was responding to the low voter turnout in Sunday's internal polls in which Kamla Persad Bissessar secured approximately 12,000 votes more than Vasan Bharat. Radhika De Silva of CNC3 News has more.
He built the party from the ground up. Now, 31 years later, Basdeo Pandey says the UNC is dead, expressing the view that the party has lost its base and was beyond repair. Pandey says the abysmal voter turnout had nothing to do with COVID-19.
Well, any party that cannot get its voters in such a high-pitched campaign, that the rank and file have lost interest in the party. I think it's going to die. It's dead. All intents and purposes.
Despite what he calls the decay of the party, Pandey says all is not lost.
That it is a great opportunity for the country to get together and form a united opposition which eschews the whole question of race, which abandons racism and a party that unites people instead of dividing them. As both the PNM and the Kamla did.
Pandey also says the new party, which will unite opposition forces, could bring an end to tribal politics. But political analyst Dr. Mukesh Basdev does not share Pandey's view. He says it was the pandemic and not a voter disenchantment which kept supporters away from the polls.
14,000 votes is still a significant quantum of votes in the internal election, given the current COVID restriction. Had that the election been held under, let's say, other conditions, then we could have actually gone into certain, if that was the result, it would have demonstrated a decline. But I would be on the safe side, looking at the pandemic regulations would have created a little deter a lot of prisons from coming out.
Dr. Basdev says there was enough time before the next election for the party to heal internally.
The best way to measure now the party's effectiveness would be on how it holds the government accountable, executive accountability via the various machinery arms like the legislature on that basis. That will test the credibility of the party in the short-term period.
He says there is still hope for the UNC. Radhika D. Silva, CNC3 News.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick.
Staffers at the VC Bird International Airport in Antigua and Barbuda have been among the key stakeholders in the national response to COVID-19. The country has been seeing a steady uptake in air traffic after having been the first in the region to reopen its airport following the lockdown due to COVID-19. Ursel Charles Jr. has been speaking with the CEO of the Antigua and Barbuda Airports Authority, who sounds a note of optimism about the future, despite the perils of the pandemic.
Amid the recent show of solidarity, principals of the Antigua-Barbuda Airport Authority (ABA) behind the scenes are hard at work to ensure the current and future operational framework ensures the safety and success of all stakeholders. CEO V. Uletta Francis proffers a lot of work is going into ensuring the future of the VC Bird International Airport at its current location remains bright.
VC Bird International Airport in this location has been here for a number of years, and for us to move at any point, it would take significant resources. And so one of the focuses of this current executive management team is to start ensuring that we're putting all the planning, all the infrastructure in place to ensure that this location remains sacred.
She infers the major threat relates specifically to that of lands.
We have our challenges with ensuring that the surrounding lands are kept sacred. There are a number of challenges, but we have plans.
While Francis is optimistic about increasing visitor arrivals to the country, she is mindful there are challenges with observing protocols with more air passenger traffic.
We are extremely excited that all these flights are coming back. We're having our challenges in terms of logistics because you don't ever build an airport for a pandemic. I think that is something that we certainly have to revisit in the future. And so logistically, we've had to interface the port health with the arriving passengers is posing some logistical challenges. But again, working together with our stakeholders is a key element of this operation.
She adds changes are coming to operations to ensure a better passenger experience on arrival at VC Bird International. For ABS News, I'm Ursel Charles Jr.
Guyana's opposition leader declines to meet with outgoing Canadian diplomat for farewell courtesy call. Other urgent political commitments have been cited by Guyana's opposition leader Joseph Harmon as the reasons for which he has declined to meet with outgoing Canadian diplomat Lillian Chatterjee. In a letter, Harmon stated that the date for the farewell courtesy call by the Canadian diplomat with his office, scheduled for Wednesday, December 9th, 2020, has become inconvenient in light of other political commitments slated for the same date. Castrie's South MP Dr. Ernest Hilaire has urged politicians to discourage tribalism and division among the electorate. He calls for a change in the tone of the political rhetoric was made at the opposition St. Lucia Labour Party's virtual public meeting on Sunday. Colby DeVoe of HTS News Force reports.
Castries South MP Dr. Ernest Hilaire has made an appeal to political figures to tamp down the flames of polarization and heal divisions among St. Lucians. Hilaire argues that disunity and hatred are the defining features of the current politics on the island. The MP addressed the opposition St. Lucia Labour Party's last virtual meeting for the pandemic year on Sunday, December 6th at the HTS studios on the Mon. He called for a reset of the body politic.
As politicians, we must not encourage the division and the tribalism. We must be able to say that elections is over and can we come back together in pursuit of our national aspirations. This is what the St. Lucia Labour Party has to do when it wins the next election. The level of tribalism and hatred among our people have gotten out of hand. We need to press the reset button. I'm not saying there should not be contests. We love a good debate. We love a good argument.
Fueled by a fragmented media environment, online echo chambers, and growing distrust, a number of countries around the world have been convulsed by hyperpartisanship and political polarization, with intense tribalism and hatred of political opponents, which has shaken societies to the core and provoked tensions among peoples. Dr. Hilaire alleges he has fallen prey to such practices.
I have been battered and bruised by this style of politics, never before in the history of St. Lucia to the extent that it is. We don't want and we will never be doing that to other people. This is not the St. Lucia Labour Party. It is not. We want a St. Lucia where we can demand accountability, we can criticize, we can demand answers, but not encourage hate and division. This must never be our style. Never, ever be our style. And the St. Lucia Labour Party wants to say that a priority for it will be efforts at bringing St. Lucians back together.
Meanwhile, opposition leader Philip J. Pear, who has been campaigning as an anti-corruption crusader, continued to stump on a platform of addressing the yawning gap of economic inequality compounded by the pandemic. He accused the UWP administration of misplaced priorities with the rollback of the laptop program and nixing of the original St. Jude Hospital, airport, and highway projects, which he argues would have delivered better infrastructure, quality healthcare, and access to continued education amid the pandemic. Pierre, like Hilaire, vowed to work to create a more inclusive St. Lucia, where civil society and the private sector are part of the decision and policy making.
Together, as a team, we will invite the citizens of St. Lucia to join us in that new challenge, one that together we will overcome. Together, with truth, dialogue, fairness, and equity, we will improve lives and livelihoods for all our people, particularly the poor, the marginalized, and the differently able. We promise you, St. Lucia, we promise you a St. Lucia where diversity and differences in opinion will be encouraged and tolerated.
The tagline, "Putting people first," thus far has been the mantra at the center of the SLP's overarching slogan in the 2020-2021 general election cycle. Colby DeVoe, HTS News Force.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.